So it has been a year and a half since I have spoken to live church. So today is like Breakthrough Sunday for me, and it's good. Excited. You guys are amazing. I am so nervous because I already struggled with social anxiety disorder, and now a year and a half of isolation and from crowds. But you throw me off, and if you laugh or clap or breathe or anything like that. And so, but I'm gonna pray. I just want to thank Pastor Rich in DC for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here. I grew up in Miami, went to Southwest Miami High down the street. I grew up in the hood, and it shaped my life. And if you live, you get better. And right? No, it's so good. Father, thank you so much for this beautiful, beautiful day. God, just seeing all these faces, it's just so awesome. God, thank you for all that you're doing here in Miami and across the world through VOUS. Thank you for Pastors Rich in DC and the gift they are to not only this church, not only this city, but to everyone whose lives are touched by them. Pray that, God, your spirit would be so present and that you would speak and go beyond my words. And God, if there's anywhere I'm not resonating with you, I pray your word would be stronger to our hearts. We love you, Jesus, and are so grateful for you. We are here because of you, Jesus. And Father, I pray for anyone who's here who just had a really tough day or week, and it just took everything they had to get here today. I pray that you would meet them in this moment, let them know that you see them, that you know them, that they matter to you, and that you would refresh them, God, and draw them close to you. We thank you, Father. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Come on, just give it up one more time. And you can have a seat. So I'm gonna tell you a couple things that are going on before we dive in to the scriptures today. By the way, I've been here before. I love this community. I've been here from the very beginning. We were so excited about when Rich in DC had the vision to plant VOUS, and we became a part of the community that helped invest, and we just believe in you so much. And I'm excited because I have a brand new book coming out in about a couple of weeks, September 14th. It's called The Genius of Jesus. I've had the privilege to write around 10 books, and I can tell you, I don't think there's a book that is like this one that's out, because Jesus is so oftentimes overlooked in the scale of historical geniuses. And I wanted to write a book that would give people who don't believe in God, people who are really skeptical about Jesus, a fresh way to see him and to meet him. And I wanted also those of us who are in faith to be able to discover what the genius of Jesus means to our own life right now. So I'm excited. It comes out September 14th. I would love for you to pre-order the book, and I would really love for you to read it and share it with friends. Also, we started a podcast to kind of parallel with this called The Genius Of, and you can go to thegeniusof.com and subscribe. I'm interviewing so many of my friends that I've known over the years that have this unique genius, and the whole theme of the podcast is that every superhero has an origin story. And so instead of just asking them to teach us what they've learned, I want to hear the story of what made them who they are. And so it's been a really fun thing. We've got about 5 or 6 of these already in the can, and we're going to be releasing these. So I want to share those with you. And other than that, I'm just excited to be alive, to be here, and to be in Miami. So I want to talk to you about the genius of Jesus and why that should matter to you, and how that impacts your life. How seeing Jesus maybe from a different perspective could actually change the way you see yourself and how you live your life. I've always been fascinated with the concept of genius ever since I was really young. Ever since I was an underachiever. And they always tell you in psychology that people tend to become what they lack. And so maybe that's why I've spent 40 years studying genius. You ever have that sense where you just felt like there was something inside of you couldn't get to? that was special, but maybe it was like trapped under the rubble of all your failures and all your fears. And I've always had that sense, even when I was young, this terrifying fear that there was nothing unique in me, that I had no talents or ability. And when I was 12 years old, I ended up in a psychiatric chair, and I was failing in every arena of life. And I think there's so many people who feel as if when gifts and talents and intelligence and uniqueness was given out, that somehow they missed that opportunity. So I spent my life studying the concept of genius, and then along the way began studying and discovering and following Jesus. And those two different journeys, pursuing Jesus and pursuing genius, collided together. But one of the things that really began to surprise me was that every list of geniuses I ever found did not have Jesus ever listed on it. I mean, there are some people you expect, like Leonardo da Vinci. He was always my favorite iconic genius, but he's always on the list. He's on every list, by the way. And Mozart would be on pretty much every list. Picasso is on pretty much every list. And then the lists kind of deviate along the way. And some lists even have Gandhi, or I've seen lists with Muhammad, seen lists with Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., lists with Benjamin Franklin. And of course, if there were lists that were more modern, there would be lists with Elon Musk, and there'd be lists with Jeff Bezos, and lists with Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs, right? And I imagine some more contemporary lists would actually put Jay-Z on there, and maybe even Beyonce. And so then you have the genetic combination of genius in their kids. But the one person who's always missing was Jesus. I started wondering, why doesn't Jesus qualify as a genius? And does he? And so I began researching, just from an objective perspective, does Jesus actually qualify as a genius? Or is this the wrong way of looking at him? Because one day I started having this conversation with myself, which I do a lot, and which is why I'm never lonely. And during the pandemic, I began having a conversation with myself. And what I have inside of me are at least two strong characters. One is a person who has this deep faith in Jesus and knows that Jesus is real. And then there's this other person inside of me that's super cynical, super skeptical, and doesn't believe in anything. And they're always talking to each other, and they're having conversations. And one day, I was sitting in the room listening to the two different me's have this conversation, and I had this thought: how odd that my entire life revolves around someone who lived 2,000 years ago. So here I am, I turned 63 next month, and I'm saying, I spent almost all of my life now, the last 43 years, following a person that lived 2,000 years ago. That's insane. Now, I know for most of the people in this room, you're going, of course. But if you're a person who follows Jesus, and if you've built your entire life on this person named Jesus, I hope you know that's a little odd. Like, it's kind of weird, right? And so I started thinking to myself, wow, how strange that my life is built around this person. What if Jesus doesn't really exist? What if he isn't really God? And I thought, wait a minute. But one thing I can't deny, see, this is the way I go back and forth, is I can't deny that my life has been changed by Jesus. So even though if it could be proven that Jesus wasn't God, what you could not prove was that my life was not changed by him. So then I thought, okay, this is a little odd, because I can understand my life being changed by the reality of Jesus, but this is bizarre that my life might be changed by the idea of Jesus. And I thought, well, if Jesus isn't God, well, if he is God, he changed me. Pretty simple. But if he isn't God, then the idea of Jesus changed me, and I never thought an idea could have that much power. And so I started having this debate with both of me, and I started wondering, what's more powerful, that I've been changed by the reality of Jesus, or I've been changed by the idea of Jesus? Because if Jesus isn't real, then the idea of Jesus is the most profound and most powerful idea that has ever existed in human history. It was an act of genius. So then I pulled back going, okay, I do believe Jesus is God, just wanted to say that. And just in case some of you are going, what did he mean? But now more than ever, I also believe that Jesus was a genius. And that what he came to do was actually an act of genius. But the part of the problem is, it's kind of hard to identify what Jesus' genius was, right? Where it was. Because when you look at Steve Jobs, you know what his genius was. It's Apple. Right? When you look at Zuckerberg, you know what his genius is. It's Facebook. When you look at Jay-Z, you know his genius. When you look at any historical genius, if it's Stephen Hawking's, you go, okay, his genius is mathematics and physics and the theory of everything. If it's Einstein, of course, it's E equals MC squared. It's the theory of relativity. If you look at Bobby Fischer, you go, it's chess. Mozart, it's music. Picasso, it's art. And so it's easy to look at a genius when you see the platform or the canvas of their genius and go, that's where their genius is lived out. But where exactly is the genius of Jesus revealed? And it hit me, it was like it exploded in my mind. The reason we can't see the genius of Jesus is because it wasn't about math, and it wasn't about art, and it wasn't about music, and it wasn't about science. The genius of Jesus actually reveals itself on the canvas of the human spirit. That we become the manifestation, the proof of the genius of Jesus. So all these questions start just reeling in my mind, going, well, wait a minute. All right, even if we could see that Jesus is a genius, and I'm convinced he was history's greatest genius. But the problem is that genius isn't transferable. Because I think Steph Curry is a genius. I do. I think he's a physical genius and a spatial genius, and he can hit a three-point shot from anywhere in any shape, form, or position. He has revolutionized the game. But if I spent my life with Steph Curry, I would not become a world-class three-point shooter. Like, if I spent my life with Bansky, if I could just know who he was, right? Or if I could spend my life with Jackson Pollock, or if I could old school and spend my life with Picasso, no matter how much time I spent with Picasso, I would never become a world-renowned painter. If I could spend my life with John Lennon, or if I could have spent my life with Mozart, I would never become a world-class musician. So what I do know is that genius isn't transferable. In fact, that's why so many people hated them, because their genius wasn't transferable. I mean, you know what the problem with geniuses are, is that they make great look average. Right? It's like, that's why a lot of geniuses really had a lot of hate, is because the moment they entered the room, awesome people looked very average. Because that genius was just an iteration above everyone else. And I'm wondering, maybe that was the problem with Jesus, because when he was 12 years old, he entered the temple, he began having conversations with the most brilliant people in Israel. They were the philosophers, theologians of their time. And at 12 years old, they were astonished by his questions. So at 12 years old, Jesus was already asking better questions than the theologians and philosophers of his time. And so when Jesus walked among us, maybe the same way that the other musicians despise Mozart, and the way other artists have envied Picasso, that there was this dynamic that when Jesus entered the room, he expressed a humanity that created attention for everyone else who was living beneath their humanity. So then the question became really important to me. All right, if Jesus is a genius and genius isn't transferable, is it possible that the genius of Jesus is transferable? That in fact, what Jesus came to do was to unlock and awaken the genius he has placed within us all. And I started looking at the Bible, the scriptures in a different way. Because see, sometimes when you read a certain passage of scripture, you already tell yourself what that passage should tell you. And so when you're reading it, it's hard to read it fresh because you can't really see it through new eyes. But I want you to look at some passages with me, and I want you to see it through the concept of genius. And asking the question, is the genius of Jesus available to you, to me, to us? So I'll just start with Romans chapter 12, verse 2. He says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And I know most of the time when we address that particular passage, it's all about figuring out God's will for your life. Because, well, if you're a follower of Jesus, half the time you don't know what God's will is for your life. You just pretend, right? And you don't really think about it all the time until you have a crisis. And when you have a huge decision to make, you go, God, what's your will? But you weren't really thinking about it yesterday when you got pizza. You didn't really think, is God's will for me to eat pizza or Chinese? And right, you just choose, right? And whatever ingredients you order in that pizza, you don't pray. God, mushrooms? Answer me, right? You don't. You just pick what you like. You just assume that's okay with God. So a lot of times we try to make things really complicated, but the reality is we just kind of live life. And then we're going, wait, how do I figure out what God's perfect will is? But I want you to step back here. He says, do not conform to the pattern of this world. Now, most of the time we put that in a moral place because parents use the Bible to try to get their children to be good. But really, this is not what that's talking about. It's talking about a limited level of thinking. So do not be conformed to the pattern of this world. See, the way you can know that's actually about your thinking is because the next line says, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. This is all about your minds. Now, here's a crazy thing. What it's actually telling us is that if you do not have a relationship with the creator of the universe, you have limited thinking. No matter how brilliant you are, no matter how talented you are, no matter how successful you are, you're not thinking at the level for which God designed you to think. And so And that's why you can actually meet people with incredible wealth. You can meet people with millions and even billions of dollars, and they're so unhappy. They've never found fulfillment, or they're struggling with the same struggles that everyone else struggles with. Because you see, when you're living outside of God, your thinking becomes conformed to the pattern of this world. And no matter how you succeed, no matter how much you accomplish, no matter how much other people want to be you, you will actually become just like everyone else at the core of your being. Which I think is interesting because a lot of times people say, I don't believe in God because I just want to be free, right? I just want to be my own person. I want to do my own thing. And yet what the Bible actually tells us, what Scripture is actually telling us is that when you live your life outside of God, you actually become a conformist. You become like everyone else. And I think sometimes we're not honest. Have you ever noticed that when people say, I don't want to follow God because I want to be free? Freedom is always about doing dumber things. It's never about doing more noble things, right? When you're trying to break free from your parents, I just want to be free. You're not usually saying, get off of me. Leave me alone. Just let me be free. I want to be more honorable than you want me to be. I want to be more honest than you want me to be. Stop it. I want to be more trustworthy. You won't. See, we push for freedom to be less rather than more. And it's because when we live our life outside of God, we conform to the pattern of this world. I'll take a real quick survey. How many of you have ever told a lie? Raise your hand. Look around. Okay, some of you, if you didn't raise your hand now. Okay, so we have a room full of liars. Okay, that's good to know. And how many have ever stolen anything? Think about it just for a minute. Okay, now we have back to question number one. How many of you have ever told a lie? Okay. You never cheated on your taxes, or you never took the cookie your mom said don't take, or you never took the girlfriend that wasn't yours, or you see, when we choose our freedom outside of God, we actually become just like everyone else. We become conformists. Now he says, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. So I don't understand all of this that this means, but I can tell you this. It's only when God transforms your mind that you are no longer a conformist. It's when you are transformed by the mind of God that you are finally free to be uniquely who you are. Now that is genius. Now look with me. So there are other passages that kind of give us the same theme. In Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, it says this: since then, you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Then he says, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. So now he's actually telling us that there are different frequencies in life. I think sometimes when we read the Bible, we just keep the thinking way too flat. I always like expanding my imagination, think about all the possibilities. Like, are there multiple dimensions? Like, are there different universes? Do I exist in different places at the same time as I do right now? That would be so awesome, because maybe in another world, I would be taller. And here what he's actually telling us is that human beings can exist in the same reality, but in different frequencies. He's saying that you can actually live at a lower frequency when you're thinking about earthly things. Or you can actually, then it says you've been raised with Christ. When you enter into a relationship with God, you now transcend out of time and space into eternity. You are now connected to the eternal, not just this moment. And now you can bring the eternal into this moment, and you become the conduit of the eternal in time and space. And he says, so stop living at this earthly frequency because you've been raised up, so now you need to think at a different level. I've always been amazed by this one whale. He just pulled me in years ago. He's called the loneliest whale in the world. Now there's a documentary about him. But for years, I've always been intrigued with this idea of 52 hertz. Because this whales communicate with a frequency. And most whales, I think, communicate around 40 frequency. Their frequency is 40. And so whales find each other. They send out a frequency of 40. They hear it. They send out a frequency of 40. And they find each other, and they move together in pods. But this one whale communicates and hears at 52 hertz. And because of that, that whale has spent its entire life alone. It cannot hear other whales, and other whales cannot hear him. In fact, they cannot find a second whale of its species that speaks at 52 hertz. And I've wondered to myself so many times, is this the human dilemma? That God designed us to live at 52 hertz, but we've chosen to live at 40 hertz. So when God speaks, we can't hear him. We say, God doesn't speak. God is not here. He's not present. He's not talking. And God just keeps speaking to us at 52 hertz, but we keep listening and talking at 40 hertz. And what God is saying, no, what I want to do, see, I'm going to talk to you at 40 hertz. I'm going to step into human history and communicate with you, but I'm not going to leave you there. I'm going to elevate you, move you back to 52 hertz so you can live in relationship with me and hear my voice. And then in 1 Corinthians 2:16, he says this. It's the end of a conversation. He says, for who has known the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? That's a rhetorical question where Paul is saying, has anyone known God's mind? How can you know what God's thinking? Have you ever thought that? How can you know what God's thinking? But then he says, but we have the mind of Christ. So he goes through this long thing saying, who can know what God's doing? I mean, can you read God's mind? Can I read God's mind? I mean, can you really know what God has in mind? Oh yeah, you can, because you have the mind of Christ. So if Jesus is the greatest genius who has ever lived, and then the one thing he wants to give us is his mind, why in the world would you think God would want us to die as fools? God wants us to live in the genius that Jesus lived out when he walked among us. There's a lot of research that's been done even on the whole dynamic of genius. And I remember when years ago I started talking about human creativity, and I said that every human being is creative. I was actually called a heretic just for saying that every human being was creative. And then when I said every human being is created to create, that humans create the future, it was really heretical. Because we keep telling each other, no, only God does that, except that you're created in the image and likeness of God. So it shouldn't surprise you that a lot of things that only God does, you can actually do. And here he's telling us, I have given you my mind, and if you have the mind of God, shouldn't it elevate your thinking? See, I think a huge part of the problem is that so much of our faith has been focused on right and wrong, just trying to get people to sin less. But Jesus didn't die so that you would sin less. He died so that his genius could be erupted in your life and you could live life fully. But here's the problem. If you go to Einstein and say, could you teach me how to shoot baskets? It's not going to go well. If you went to Steve Jobs and if you said to him, hey, could you teach me how to paint? It wouldn't have gone well. If you went to Picasso and said, could you teach me about physics? It wouldn't go well. See, the problem is we keep going to every other source of genius to figure out how to be fully human, rather than to the singular genius who knows how to live out our humanity. And then in that is where your genius will be found. I found this amazing research by a guy named George Land. In 1968, he was hired by NASA to identify geniuses so they could hire him for the NASA projects when they're going to the moon and out in space and all this sort of thing. And so he created a genius test to identify geniuses. And then later, he translated that test for children. In 1993, he wrote a book on the relationship of genius and creativity to children. And they followed children for over a decade. Let me tell you what they found. When they began studying this group of children, when they were 5 years old, they gave them the genius test and found that 98% of children passed the test of being a genius. That means 98% of you in this room would have easily passed a genius test when you were 2 years old. Then they gave the test again when they were 5 years later when they were 10 years old, but only 30% of them still expressed the dynamics, the characteristics of genius. So somehow, from the age of 5, 98% of them passing the genius test, and now only 30% of them passing the genius test. Well, they came back 10 years later when they were 15 years old, and only 12% of those same kids were now identifiably geniuses. From 98% 5 years later to 30%, 5 years later to 12%. And by the way, by the time a person becomes an adult, when they're given the genius test, only 2% of adults express the characteristics of genius. Now, let me tell you what they concluded. Let me read to you George Land's conclusion. What we concluded, wrote Land, is that non-creative behavior is learned. In other words, to live a life absent of genius is learned. You were born a genius. Now, that may be really hard for you to believe, and maybe even harder for the people who know you to believe. But unless you're in that 2%, and I actually think that 2% probably even more of a genius. They just answer the questions differently. See, you were born a genius, but somewhere along the way, that genius was lost. It isn't actually about trying to make a kid a genius or making your kid a genius. It wasn't really about trying to make you a genius. It was actually about trying to protect the genius that God had already placed within you. So I've wondered, like, what are humans really like? Have you ever thought about it? You know, because those of us who believe in the scriptures, we believe in this thing called the fall, where man and woman severed their relationship with God, and that relationship God was broken, and now we're a shadow of what we once were. I've always wondered, like, okay, we're the shadow, and maybe genius is almost like a light through the window of the human spirit, showing us what humans were always intended to be. See, maybe those sparks of genius, those aberrations of genius, maybe those women and men that we go, that's a genius, that they're actually simply pointing us to who we were always created to become. We have the Olympics going on right now. And I remember when I walked to the Nike store a while back, and on the wall it said, if you have a body, you're an athlete. You ever seen that? If you have a body, you are an athlete. And I remember looking at that going, you don't have my body. Right? and you ever read things and they're so inspiring, you know they're not true, but you want them to be true? Now, I want to say that it's true and not true. See, if you have a body, you are an athlete. You may not be a good athlete. You may not have actually disciplined yourself to pull all your athleticism out of you. But here's the thing. If you have a body, you're an athlete, yes, but if you have a body, that doesn't mean you're an Olympian. See, and what happens sometimes is we measure ourselves against the Olympians and think, oh, we don't have anything. And so we don't even try to pull out the best that's within us. Now, I know this. If I do have a body, it's clear, ever expanding. And it's not making me a better athlete. And I'm probably already past my athletic prime. I'm just guessing. And so I'm never going to be Olympian, but I can still be athletic. But even if I don't measure myself against the best in the world, have I measured myself against the best of myself? And then I was in the weight room yesterday. Yes, I still try. And I saw this inscription on the wall. If it's humanly possible, I can do it. Wow. I wish that were true. But there's just a lot of things humans can do that I can't do. I mean, women's gymnastics, I can't do that. I just like, no, don't even want to try. There are things I can't do. See, if it's humanly possible, a human can do it. But you see, there are statements we make, but I think they're almost like shadows of us. I've always wondered, because I love comic books. In fact, I've worked on a graphic novel this year, and I love superheroes. Because I think superheroes are a shadow memory of who humans are. I mean, I read the Bible, I think, I wonder if there was a time. I know I shouldn't be going here, but I'm just going to go here. I wonder if I wonder if the reason we have memories and mythologies of Atlantis is there's a time humans could breathe underwater. I don't know, I just thought that. I mean, it's like, it's not biblical, but it's not unbiblical. And I was like, I wonder if there's a time where like humans could fly. Because it says that man was to have, by that humanity is supposed to have authority over the birds in the air and the fish of the sea and the animals that walk on the ground, right? I'm like, okay, God gave us authority and responsibility of all creation. How are we supposed to have authority more than just the land because we can walk, but authority over the birds in the air? How do we do that if we can't fly? We're supposed to have authority of the fish in the sea. How do we even know what's in the ocean if we can't breathe under the water? And maybe the human imagination creating airplanes is trying to create the construct in the material world of what we lost. And maybe we create submarines because we're trying to reclaim the realms that we lost. This is just me just dreaming, speculating of possibilities. But wouldn't it be incredible to see what we could have done? So there's one window here. I'm going to give it to you. It's in Genesis chapter 2, verses 19 and 20. This is before the fall. This is actually before Eve. It says, now the man had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave name to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, there was no suitable helper to be found. Now, there's so much here, but I just want to focus on one particular thing, the assignment. God gave Adam the assignment of naming every species on this planet. Now, I don't know about you, but that requires a lot of memory. Like, I used to have a memory, but I don't really have one anymore. Do you know the only phone number I know is mine? I don't even know my son Aaron's phone number. I don't know my wife Kim's phone number. I don't know our home number if we have one. I don't even know if we have a home number, to be honest with you. And I don't know my daughter's number. I don't know Mosaic's number. I don't know my general manager's number, my assistant's number. I only know my number. If I get hit by a car and I have to call someone, I will call myself. I mean, that's all I have available. And I wonder how many of you actually know any number besides your number? And you only know your number because they ask your number when you go to the doctor or you go to a restaurant, or you go someplace, and they want to text you back, can we have your number? And so I know my number because I'm required to use it. But because if you don't use it, you lose it. And so I don't have to remember any numbers, so I remember my number. And I know this is crazy, and it's because I'm older than a lot of you. There was a time there were no cell phones. There were only landlines. I know, it's crazy, right? And so there was a time where you didn't have access to everything. There was a time where you didn't have a computer in your hand all the time. This is crazy. There was a time where we could add. Like if you had to tip 18%, you just did the math. And you could actually do 20%. You didn't have to round up to 20 or round down to 15 to make the math easier. You could actually just pick out 18 you knew. But now you have to use your phone to know what 20% is. And it's so easy. You just divide, you just drop the number to 10%, then double it. It's so simple. But we don't do math anymore, right? And you know what else? Oh, I was alive when there was no internet. When there was, or as Kawhi Leonard said, before the World Wide Web. I lived before then. You see, I lived before you could Google everything. So you don't have to know anything because you can Google everything. You don't have to remember anything. And my wife would always ask me things like, how do you remember that? I go, because I lived before then, right? Do you know, I used to have a memory. I did. I actually had like an eidetic memory. I remember one time I went to a room just for fun. There were like 100 people in the room. And I said, everyone, just take a seat. And I didn't know anyone. And I said, give me your name. And I just went, every single name, almost 100 people. And then I said, okay, everybody get up and move. Stand over there. And I moved every single person to the exact place where they were seated, telling them their name, memorizing it instantly. Now, it's not because I'm a genius. It's because I had a memory. See, it's because I used it all the time. And here's the thing. If you don't know that you're created by God in his image, if you don't understand there's genius inside of you, you will not use it. Because if you don't know it's there, you will act as if it wasn't there. See, if you don't know it's there, you'll act as if no one ever gave it to you. And if you don't use it, you will lose it. So why is it important to understand that you have the genius of Jesus existing within you, living within you? It's because if you don't use it, you will lose it. So it's time to start using it to make a difference in the world. So Adam names every animal and remembers. Somewhere along the way, I would have got confused. Somewhere along the way, I would have started going cat, dog, rat, just keeping the 3 letters, because, at first I would have been really, really cool. Hippopotamus, right? Alligator, right? Platypus, platypi. I would have had so much fun that front. Let's divide alligator, crocodile. You can't see the difference, but I can. Huh? But after a while, you're just like cat, dog, rat, mouse. And then I would have started duplicating. Camel. You already used that one, you sure? Yes. Amel, Mel, Lamel. I would have just run out. Think about this. Not only did he have the ability to remember every single animal and name them, he had the creativity to not run out of names. Now, I don't know what you think about these early images in the Bible, but let me tell you, this is a window to human capacity. Is it possible you have underestimated who you are? And yet when the scripture says you've been raised with Christ, so now set your mind on the things above. The things above, by the way, are not physics. You're going, thank God. Right? The things above is not botany or biology or geometry or geology or geography. He says the things above are things like compassion, kindness, patience, gratitude, love. In fact, he says there's nothing higher than love. Is it possible that what Jesus came to do is to materialize what it looks like when a human being lives purely and fully by love? And that love was his genius. I've become convinced that empathy is the highest form of intelligence. Because you see, you will not spend your life searching for the answer to 2 + 2 = 4. But you will spend your life searching for love. You will spend your life searching for meaning. You will spend your life trying to figure out why you're here and does your life matter. And what I think we've messed up on is that we've actually told people, Jesus died so that you could stop sinning and be good. And going, no, God's intention is so much deeper and more profound than that. The creator of the universe, who imagined the universe and then spoke it into existence, imagines you and imagines your future. And we try to fit God into our small lives and our small brains, and we try to bring God into the small universe of us, and it must be suffocating for God. He wants to erase the boundaries of your limitation. He wants to expand the boundaries of your imagination. He wants to create enough space inside of you so that you can receive God-sized dreams and live a God-sized life. So Jesus was crucified, then he rose from the dead, and he rose from the dead on a Sunday, which was an available Sunday, and that's what God does. He just comes back to life and conquers death. And then he's walking down a road called Emmaus, and there's a couple of guys, and they're talking about what happened in Jerusalem, and Jesus acts like he doesn't know. He goes, "What are you guys talking about? Haven't you heard what happened in Jerusalem? You must be the only person that doesn't know what happened in Jerusalem." And they start telling Jesus about Jesus, which is how we pray usually. We tell God everything he already knows, instead of listening to what we don't know. And so they start telling Jesus about Jesus and how he was crucified, he was a prophet, and how there's rumors that he's gonna rise on the third day, and today's the third day, and who knows what's gonna happen. And then it says when they got to the end of the journey, Jesus acted like he was gonna keep on going. That was Jesus acting 101. And they said, "Please stay." And he goes, "Okay, I'll stay." And then they spent the time talking, and they never recognized him, it says. And then listen to this verse, Luke 24:45. Then he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures. Then he opened their minds. God wants to blow your mind. He wants to destroy every wall that limits you, every fear that has built up boundaries that controls you, every doubt that consumes you and pulls you under the rubble of your failures and your fears. He wants to open your mind so that in that open mind, he can place his dreams for you and for the world around you. But here's the beautiful thing about genius. See, genius is never given to you for you. See, the genius of Jesus was not given to him for him. It was given to him by his Father to give to us. And when you think your genius is for you, you become a narcissist or even a sociopath. But when you understand that whatever genius God has placed in you has been given to you so that you can give it as a gift to the world, then you become a steward of the extraordinary. And there's some of you here that you've just never trusted Jesus with your life. You've just never stepped across the line of faith. Maybe it's never made sense to you. It hasn't connected you. Maybe it's because we've been talking to you about Jesus at 40 hertz, and we need to talk to you about Jesus at 52 hertz. And see, maybe you're here right now, and what Jesus is doing right now is he's opening up your mind to understand. Because to understand that God himself has stepped into human history, that God himself took on flesh and blood, that God himself walked among us and his name is Jesus, the God who is the giver of life allowed himself to be put to death, the God himself rose on the third day so that he could live in us. It's gonna take some mind expanding for you to embrace that. But Jesus is ready to do that right now. If in this moment, you don't have all the answers, but you know you need God. Maybe somehow in this moment, it finally makes sense that God came into history for you. That the reason people have been changed by someone who died 2,000 years ago was because he's more than an idea. He is Jesus, the Savior of the world, who came for you to forgive you of everything you've ever done wrong, to forgive you of every sin, and to set you free to live the future God created you to live. But more than that, God sees genius in you because he put his image in you. So would you right now, would you just bow your heads with me just for a moment? If you're here right now and you've never crossed the line of faith, you've never given your life to Jesus, you've thought about it, you've gotten close, but you've always pulled back. But right now, God is opening up your mind to understand the scriptures, to understand what Jesus did for you. If right now you're ready to trust Jesus with your life, I want to lead you in a simple prayer. It's not everything you and God need to talk about, but it is where it begins. So right now, if you're ready to trust Jesus with your life, right now, would you just pray this simple prayer? Jesus, I give you my life. That's it. Just tell him, Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my life. Right now, just tell him that. See, Jesus is a gentleman. And he will never force himself on you. So he waits for you to give your life to him so he can put his life in you. And let me tell you, when Jesus comes to live in you, the mind of Christ becomes yours, and the genius of God now informs your soul. Father, I pray for those who in this moment have opened up their hearts to you, have given their lives to Jesus. I pray that right now they would know they've been forgiven and that they have been set free. And God, for all of us as well who have come to know you, but we've been living in the status quo, we've been living in mediocrity, we've been settling for less. I pray, God, that you would awaken and unleash the genius inside of every single person. And I pray, Jesus, that you would be revealed in such a powerful way that the world might know that you are alive and well. For your genius is expressed in the canvas of our souls. May our lives be a reflection of the genius in you, Jesus. We pray in your name. Amen. Amen. Can we just thank God for those who responded to him right now? So good. So good. Hey, if you crossed the line of faith and trusted Jesus with your life, I want to tell you something. That was a stroke of genius. And today is the beginning of new things. God bless.